Hello, good and faithful people of the Church of the Mediator. It's Father Dale. I hope you're well whenever and wherever it is you hear this message. This week, we are in the first week of Advent and moving very quickly. This is Thursday, of course, already preparing for the second Sunday of Advent. Advent feels to me like it always goes so quickly, so rapidly. Part of that is the pace of things as we pick up and prepare for all the Advent-y things that happen, as well as preparing for Christmas. My question to you today is, what are candles made of? First, this is a two-parter. This is a real serious week of questions. What are candles made of? And then secondarily, why do we use them in Christian worship? I'll talk about that in a minute. Want to remind you, of course, that this Saturday at 11:30, we will have our Advent soup sampler luncheon in the Commons Room. Please plan to join us. It's a whole parish event for both 1 p.m. and 9 a.m.ers. Then, of course, we'll celebrate the second Sunday of Advent on Sunday with 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. It is a first Sunday, even though it's the second Sunday of Advent, which has me completely confused at this point in time. It's the first Sunday of the month, which is also our Sunday when we encourage each other to give generously to the Rector's discretionary fund, which, of course, goes to take care of lots of people in many different ways. I also want to remind you that the giving tree is up in the narthex, which benefits Bloom for Women. I hope that you will take one of the tags or more of the tags and also sign them out on the sign-out sheet on the wall so that we know who has those tags, and that you will take care of providing those Christmas gifts for women and their children who are seeking a more stable life after having been victims of human trafficking. Thank you to Jessica Armstrong for organizing that as she did last year. So candles, my friends, what are candles made of? Well, they're made of wax, of course, right? But that's only part of what my question is it happens that for most of human history, candles tended to be made of tallow, of beef fat, which was pretty stinky when it burned. So in churches and in wealthy homes, they tended to make candles out of beeswax, which is harder to come by and more costly, but smells nicer. So in our case, we have 51%, so it's just a little over half the percentage of beeswax in our candles. These are new. We've just gone back to using real candles on the altar and in the chancel after for quite a number of years having what looked like candles but were actually oil containers. They had an oil solution in them that burned with a wick that burned. These are real candles now, as I said, 51% beeswax, but then they make them now with stearine, which is a byproduct of beef tallow, but takes out all the stinkiness. And we, as a result, have clean burning and lovely candles that are partially from bees and partially from beef from cows. The second part of my question is why do we use them? So this has contested history in our tradition, actually, that in the 1540s, Edward VI, who was the king briefly after King Henry VIII and the English Reformation, he was kind of an integral young king in the English Reformation, he decreed that there should be 2 candles on the altar, at least. So as you see, that continues, it comes down to us. We tend to have 2 large candles on the table of the altar, the mensa of the altar. Sometimes we supplement those with other candles round about. Traditionally, in the High Middle Ages and in the Baroque period, there were generally 3 candles behind on what they call the gradine. In our case, we have a little kind of a retable behind the altar. There would be 6. The big 6 is what they'd call them. They were very tall and showy. We have kind of a hint of that because we have our 2 on the altar and then we have our 4 behind. And then we also, I know this is differed rector by rector, but I like lots of candles because I like pretty things. We also have our processional torches that sit out at the corners of the footpiece, which is the name for the step that the altar sits on. All of these things have special names in church speak. The reason we use candles is because they're pretty and because they provide light. Now, of course, we live in an era where we have artificial light, we have electricity, and so we don't need the light of candles to be able to see. But you can imagine, particularly in evening services, but even in the morning services in a church that's mostly stained glass, it can be a pretty dark space, and so you need candles to be able to see, to be able to read by, to be able to, all of those things that are important to our worship. Candles are pretty, and there's also something about candlelight. I think that you will probably agree with me. There's something about candlelight that gives ambiance and has a kind of quintessential quality that invites us into the mystery of our faith. Now, as I mentioned to you before, candles have a contested history because, yes, King Edward VI, sorry about that, decreed that there should be 2 candles on the altar, but the Puritan faction, the more Protestant faction of the Church of England, tended to think that that was a little bit too papist, a little too much like the Church of Rome. So there was a long period of history where most Episcopalians would not have experienced candles on the altar table or on the table in many places. It was not an altar of stone. It would be a table, especially in the colonies, a table of wood with legs. In the 19th century, in the 1900s, what happens is during the Anglo-Catholic revival, and high church fights, people start putting candles back on the altar. In the 1860s and the 1870s, there were actually resolutions brought to General Convention to try and ban the use of candles in the Episcopal Church. Those resolutions did not pass General Convention, and nowadays it would be a very odd thing indeed to go into an Episcopal church and have no candles on the altar. Flowers were another thing that was hotly debated in those days that now we just expect as part of the beauty of our worship and part of the beauty of what it means to do what we do Sunday by Sunday and day by day. And in our case also, the 2 big candles on the altar tended to be placed there in the Middle Ages so that when the priest elevated the host, and of course you'll remember in the Middle Ages, like it is in our Orthodox siblings churches nowadays, the priest always stands facing east together with the people. We identify that as the priest having his or her back to us, but it's actually the priest standing in the same direction as the gathered assembly. The priest would elevate the host over his head, and that candle, those tall candles, would give light to people who wanted to see the sacrament, to see the body of Christ, the real presence of Christ in the sacramental bread of Holy Communion. All of that is a little bit of our tradition. We have candles because, well, Jesus is light and we are called to be light, of course. You can always make interesting connections with those things, but mostly because candles are pretty and fire is beautiful and it adds in ambiance. See you on Sunday, my friends. Until then, blessings.